sure there's a nice, like, sophisticated name for it. Bank.
Yes. You sounds kind of weird, yes, so we'll keep it.
That's great.
All right, welcome aboard, guys. It's the second day of our Civic Connection Day. If you were able to make 10 a.m., we had some time hanging out with a couple members of the school board. Today we're hanging out with members of the Missouri House of Representatives. Politically active, putting this on. My name is co-sponsor Andrew Crocker. We will introduce our guests momentarily, but first of all, make sure we have food at the back. Help yourself. We have food in the back. I think we have drinks. What do we have for drinks? I mean, you can't beat that. So help yourself. Grab some food, make yourself comfortable. Hopefully a little bit later we can open the floor. If anybody have any thoughts, feel free to share them with our representatives. But right now we are joined by a Democrat representative in the House of Representatives of Missouri, Betsy Fogle, and Republican member of the House of Representatives of Missouri, Alex Riley. Round of applause for our guests. Thank you so much. Those of you whose hands are free and not holding tacos or anything like that, once again, help yourself. Anyways, we are joined by members of Politically Active. Go ahead and introduce yourselves, and when we get to Miranda at the end, Miranda, feel free to get this conversation rolling.
Hi, I'm Boden. I'm my first year here.
Hi, I'm Sara. This is my first semester.
Hi, I'm Miranda. I'm the co-president of Politically Active. Hi guys, it is lovely to have you guys here. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get started today with just talking a little bit about the nature of your positions in the House of Representatives. Can you tell us a little bit about what the function of the Missouri House of Representative committees are, and if you guys are members of any?
Testing. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Betsy. I represent House District 135, which is just on the other side of National, the northeast quadrant of the city of Springfield. Alex and I, Representative Riley and I, have both served for 5 years in the Missouri House. We're juniors. In the state of Missouri, you can serve up to 8 years. So we're about halfway through our term if our constituents continue to send us back. I serve on multiple committees, but spend the bulk of my time on the state appropriations or budget committee. So I am one of about 30 people who direct our state budget. We passed it out of the House of Representatives 2.5 weeks ago, and it totaled just under $50 billion. So it's obviously a lot of money. So I spend the bulk of my time in hearing rooms, figuring out where to spend your hard-earned tax dollars and what investments to make in our state. I also serve on the Health and Mental Health Policy Committee. So we talk about in that committee how to expand access to healthcare, access to mental health services, how to reduce costs for prescriptions, and all things related to health and mental health policy. And finally, I serve on the Fiscal Review Committee. So any bill that has a fiscal note, meaning it spends more than $250,000, I am one of 7 people that decides whether or not we're going to send those bills to the floor to be voted on, and making sure that the bills that we're crafting and passing are fiscally responsible.
So my role is a little bit different. I have the honor of serving as the majority leader in the House of Representatives. So for those of us who are native Springfield folks, that's kind of cool for us to have a majority leader from Springfield. We haven't had one in 100 years. We've only had 2 in the 200 years that we've been a state. So it's a pretty exciting thing for us in Springfield to have a majority leader from here at home. And my job is really, there's a number of functions, but the main thing that I do is I decide what bills are brought to the floor of the House of Representatives for debate, for a vote. I can help control the flow of debate as far as how long things are going to go, and ultimately decide if a bill is going to be voted on or not. So it's an exciting position because the truth of it is no bill can go to the governor's desk unless I allow that to happen. So it's a very impactful position, but it's one that I don't take lightly. So one of the things that I try and do is, yes, certainly trying to move forward the agenda of the caucus that I serve, the House Republican Majority Caucus. But at the same time, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit about this, over the course of the time we have together is most of the bills that we work on at the state level are not purely partisan issues. It's really a very small number where you have all the Republicans on one side and all the Democrats on one side. I would say probably 5% or less of the bills that we do. Typically, it's kind of weird factions of Republicans and weird factions of Democrats joining together to get the number of votes that you need to pass a bill. So right now, you have, the House is composed of 163 members. And it takes 82 members to pass a bill out of the House. So a lot of what I spend my time doing is when I identify a bill that I want to bring to the floor for debate to try and get it to the governor's desk, is trying to put together that coalition to get to 82 votes. And as you all know, for being a politically active group, it's not really true that we have two parties in Missouri. We have more like 10. You have a number of factions within the Republican Party, you have a number of factions within the Democrat Party, and there are some similarities with Republican factions and Democrat factions at times where it makes more sense to try and get a bipartisan coalition to pass a bill. So I spend a lot of my time working on building those coalitions to get those 82 votes that you need to pass something out of the House. So that's generally the nature of what I do. So because of being the majority leader, I don't sit on any assigned committees like Betsy and pretty much every other representative does. My role is more kind of moving all the various pieces around holistically for the session and what we want to accomplish.
I'm going to jump in and add, Alex is also slated to be the next Speaker of the House, and in terms of powerful positions, that's one of the most powerful positions in state government, and he probably isn't going to say that about himself, but I wanted to say it to the room that that will also be very great for Southwest Missouri to have somebody in that most powerful position who wants to bring investments and good policy for Southwest Missouri and get it across the finish line.
Okay, so my question is kind of built off. Our last session, we interviewed 2 members of our local school board, so local government, and some of the stuff that they discussed was how does like the state government and of course the federal government like influence local decisions. So building on that, my question is, how often does the state government clash with local governments, and in your experience, what do you guys tend to clash about, if you've noticed any patterns?
I'll take that one first. So yes, there is quite a bit of tension at times. And some of it is partisan, and that is the reality of it. So when you have a state that has a Republican supermajority legislature, Republicans at every statewide office in the state, you're going to have some natural tension with that dynamic in your more left-leaning cities. So that's a constant presence that is probably unavoidable. And I think you see tension between the state and local level, not just on that Republican versus Democrat level. I think you see it really across the board when you have folks at the state level that have certain policy views and what they think should be the case across the board, and you have local folks that just have different views. So generally, you do have a lot of tension, and I don't know that that's bad. I think it's just kind of the nature of the political system that we have, that you're going to have some tension there. But the answer is yes, there can be quite a bit of tension from whether it's budgetary or just how much role should the state have in telling local entities what they can and cannot do, and it applies across a whole spectrum of issues.
Yeah, and I would just add, we have the ongoing joke, I don't know if joke is the right word, but we like to say we're all local control until we're not. So when we're debating a bill in Jefferson City and it is maybe a preemption bill, so the state telling local government what they can and can't do, all of us will say, oh, we're for local control until that bill does something that we don't like, and And then we all tend to be somewhat inconsistent or incongruent in that commitment to local control. I think there are a few members of the House that are like really consistent on that. If whatever that bill in front of us says increases state power over local control, they're going to vote against it. But a lot of us will look at a bill and say, maybe we want our local school board to make that decision, but we really like this bill, so we're going to preempt them. Or we want our city to be able to, I think a lot of the COVID regulations come to mind. What was the state's role in telling local cities and local municipalities what they couldn't do in terms of COVID regulations? And so I think when we talk about local control, it's something that we all tend to be, and you can disagree if you want, but we all tend to be pretty inconsistent just based on whether or not we like the policy that's in front of us.
So in working in government at the state level, what are you able to do for your constituents that local and national government cannot?
Do you want to take that one first?
So I really do think that the closer to the people a decision can be made, the better. I like when our local school boards make decisions. I like when our city council or county commission makes decisions because they are more responsive to the people. I think the same can be said about state government. Both Alex Riley and I represent about 38,000 people. I should be accountable to each one of those individuals. Our state senators represent about 5 times that amount, and then of course when you're looking to DC, those individuals represent a large number of people. So I think for us, what we can offer our constituents, number one, if you reach out to your state representative and you don't get a response back, your state representative is doing a bad job. That's irregardless of party. If you reach out and you ask for time or a meeting or thoughts on a bill and you don't hear back, I think that should be a red flag to you. I also think that state government is kind of the perfect balance for a lot of these decisions to be made because we're close enough. We live in Missouri full time. We represent a smaller amount of people. And I think when I think about things like constituent services, one of my favorite parts of my job is if someone reaches out to my office and maybe they are struggling with a Medicaid application that they submitted three weeks ago and they haven't heard back from the department. Alex and I have offices that can reach out to the department on their behalf and help remedy that problem. And so I think our offices can be used, number one, of course, to debate good policy, to craft a sound budget, but also to help our constituents back home in the day-to-day problems that either make their lives easier or make their lives difficult.
100% agree with all of that, and just to add a little bit to it. So because of the fact that we represent primarily 38,000 constituents, right? You have priority. We represent the whole state too, so all 6.2 million Missourians. But the 38,000 that are within our districts have priority. And that means that you have a lot more access to your state lawmakers than you think you do. You probably can't walk into the governor's office, probably can't walk into your congressperson's office or your US senator's office. Maybe you can, but most of us can't. But you can do that with us. If I have somebody from back home, I will try and do everything I can to clear the calendar to meet them, and I know Betsy does the same thing. And that means that you really have a unique ability to impact policy. And that's not just my feelings, I think most legislators talk about that. So when we are having our meetings behind closed doors, talking about, hey, what type of legislation are we going to move forward? How are we going to vote on a particular bill? You have a lot of members that are extremely influenced by what their constituents say and what they think and what they ask, particularly if it's not one of those things that you have very strong philosophical views on, and you just think, I don't really have a strong philosophical position, I'm going to just vote however my constituents ask me to vote. And when you go and reach out and let them know, hey, this is something that I care about, this is why I think you should vote yes or no, or fund this particular budget item, that really has a huge impact. You all have a lot more power than you recognize, especially at the state level. And to Betsy's point, one of the other, it's kind of unfortunate that this is true, but it is true. One of the little superpowers that state reps have is if you are having a problem with something going on in state government, say you're having a problem with the Department of Motor Vehicles, and I think probably all of us have at some point, had some kind of issue with the DMV, or whatever, then you can reach out to us, and we tend to have an ability to make that problem get better quicker. Part part of that is because as state legislators, we control the department's budgets. And they don't like to make us grumpy because when you have grumpy legislators that control your budget, that can be kind of a problem for the departments. So that's one other thing that a lot of folks don't know that we can do. We don't just pass laws, we don't just pass budgets. We can also be kind of a liaison between you and other entities within state government to try and help government better serve you as an individual. So that's another thing that we can do to be helpful.
Okay, so kind of a fun question. What's something the state government deals with that would surprise most people who maybe don't pay attention to state politics or government or anything like that?
So this is one that's kind of unique to this year, and I would never thought that state government would play a role in this or not, but I'm a big Chiefs fan. I'm also a big Cardinals fan, but I do like the Royals, and I like the big Missouri, but I am a Cardinals girl. So right now, if you guys follow the news, you're probably watching that both the Royals and the Chiefs are possibly leaving the state of Missouri and either moving to the Kansas side or relocating somewhere else. And so the state has kind of been petitioned or been a part of the conversations about what financial incentives the state might want to offer to keep the Chiefs and the Royals within the confines of the state of Missouri. And so as a Chiefs fan, never in a million years I think I'd be in a position to possibly be at the table to talk about how do we incentivize, should we incentivize, and if we do, how should we incentivize keeping these two teams in the state of Missouri. But a lot of people probably wouldn't ever think that Missouri state government would be having conversations about how to keep the greatest NFL team in the world in the state of Missouri. So that one's kind of fun.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah.
So another thing that's directly relevant to some things going on now, had just this past week a lot of meetings with companies that are based in Missouri that are concerned about the tariffs that we hear about at the federal level. Particularly companies, I'm just going to give an example of one that I met with dealing with fireworks. And as Missourians, I learned that we, per capita, shoot off more fireworks than any other state in the country, and we spend more of our money on fireworks than any state in the country. And that makes sense. I look at my spending in June and July, it's like, yes, I'm definitely helping to that statistic. So one of the things that they were coming to some of us that are kind of higher up in the House leadership is if we had any ability to work with the folks at the federal level to let them know about, hey, how important this industry is to Missouri, and there's just no domestic market for fireworks manufacturing, and asking for our help to try and get them some relief from the 150% tariffs or whatever it is that we have slapped on China right now. And things like that where it kind of makes sense, where there's no domestic industry there. It's you're going to have them or you're going to not, and if you do have them, it's going to cost 3 times more and have a real impact on our state's economy and what we like to do as Missourians come 4th of July, which is blow up a lot of stuff. So that's kind of a fun one too, where it's not something I can't pass a law in Missouri to address the tariff situation, but we do have connections and a voice that we can use to, again, voice concerns from our constituents up the chain.
Can you share your perspective on why you voted how you did on the House Joint Resolution number 73?
Sure, I'll take that one first. So for probably everyone knows what that is, but if you don't, House Joint Resolution 73 is a measure that was passed out of the House this week that would put another question on the ballot in front of the voters, likely next year, dealing with primarily abortion issues. So from my perspective and a lot of the folks who are on the pro-life side of the equation would say is with Amendment 3 that we had to pass last year at the ballot box, narrowly, but it did pass, was very aggressive. So you went from very, very aggressive pro-life laws that were, even as a pro-life person, I recognize, much more pro-life than where the majority of the population is, to abortion laws that are some of the most pro-abortion of any state in the country. So what the measure that is now passed out of the House, and we'll see what the Senate does, is something that recognizes that the laws in the past were more aggressive than where the population is, but we also believe that the current state of the law is also more aggressive on the other side from where the majority of the population is. So this is just putting a question in front of the voters that would allow you all a choice to decide, do you like the current state of the law, or do you think that we should make some additional adjustments? And I think that's a good thing to do, to put an additional question, find out with a little more detail where the voters are, and to, again, allow another choice to be made. And if the voters say yes, then I'm sure the debate will continue. And if the voters say no and reject the measure that the Republican legislature put on the ballot, then we'll have to take another look and decide strategically what we want to do. But that's what it does, is it merely puts another question in front of you all for you to consider next year.
Yeah, I'll start by saying, Rep. Riley earlier in his comments talked about how truly 90% of what we do in the state capitol has some level of bipartisan cooperation. It's usually Republicans and Democrats behind closed doors working on language that suits both parties, or it's an idea that doesn't necessarily have any partisan lean to it. When I think about the conversations in Jefferson City that are probably more difficult for us to have as a body, definitely access to abortion is at the top of that list. So as Rep. Riley mentioned, we passed House Resolution 73 out of the House this week. I want to give credit to Representative Riley. In years past, when we've debated abortion bills on the floor, we haven't always been able to, as members of the minority, have proper time frames to express our thoughts, and debate sometimes gets shut down, in my opinion, a little too prematurely, but Alex let us have a really good, robust debate, both on perfection and third read of the bill. So to give a very brief overview of the history of abortion action, or abortion access here in Missouri. In 2019, we passed House Bill 126, and that was basically a complete abortion ban. At the time, Roe versus Wade was still kind of the law of the land. In that bill, there was a trigger ban that said if Roe was ever overturned, then Missouri would become a state with a complete abortion ban. Roe was overturned, as I'm sure a lot of you remember, and within 24 hours, we signed in Missouri a blanket complete abortion ban, and that was kind of the law here in Missouri for a while. Last year, in November of 24, Amendment 3 was on the ballot, and it passed by 53%, I think, statewide, around that margin. And the language of that basically said that the General Assembly could enact abortion law post-fetal viability, which is, most people would say, about 20 weeks. But other than that, state government couldn't infringe or restrict access to abortion. There was a lot of other complicated, nuanced language in that, but in summary, that's kind of what it did. So it comes as no surprise to me when abortion is such a emotional thing to talk about for a lot of people, a very highly passionate thing for both sides of the aisle to talk about. And I think our debate on Tuesday really highlighted why members of both sides of the aisle feel the way that they feel about abortion access. This House resolution would be, and jump in, tell me if you think I'm mischaracterizing it, but it would make it to where if you were a victim of sexual assault or incest, you could access abortion up to 12 weeks. Other than that, in fetal abnormality, up to 12 weeks. Other than that, we would go back to a state that you didn't have abortion access unless you fell in those categories. I think a lot of people on my side of the aisle got up and talked about their experiences being sexually assaulted, or we had some children's division workers whose jobs it was for years of their life to help children navigate these horrible situations, who had been victims of sexual violence and domestic assault, those sorts of things. So there'd be 12-week exceptions for if you fell in those categories, but other than that, we would go back to having pretty much a blanket abortion ban here in Missouri. So I think both sides are coming at this from a very sincere place. I voted no for multiple reasons. One, I think that language is too restrictive. And two, in my mind, we as a state just voted on this issue in November, and it passed 53% statewide, but overwhelmingly in House District 135. And even if it was something that I didn't like, I probably wouldn't go to Jeff City and use my platform knowing that it passed with such a substantial margin in my own House district.
Speaking with that, you felt like, at least in the House, you had more of a voice. A Missouri Children and Families Committee hearing for the House Joint Resolution number 73 on April 9th resulted in constituents trying to provide testimony being cut off. How do you feel about this, given the hearing was supposed to be an open forum?
I can talk about that too. As someone who's chaired challenging committees in the past before I took this role. So to give the full history of that too, because that is the headline, the week before there was an additional hearing on this exact same topic that went for 4 or 5 hours, where everyone who came to testify was given an opportunity to be heard. So I think what happened is another hearing was called on basically the exact same topic, where you had mostly the same individuals there to testify again. And the chair of that committee, so as committee chairs, you're given quite a bit of latitude under the House rules and how you want to run your committees. You can basically run it as tight as you want. So for me, when I did my committee hearings in the past, I would try and give everybody an opportunity to be heard whenever whenever it was at all possible. So I'll give you one example, and I think it'll help maybe put into perspective what has gone on this past couple of weeks. So a little over 2 years ago now, it was the first committee hearing I actually ever chaired, and we were working on bills dealing with another very sensitive social issue on transgender issues and the role of the state in protecting kids or allowing kids to go through transition procedures. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to create an opportunity for every single person that was in the room to be heard, to have an opportunity to do that. We ended up having that hearing. It started at 4:30 in the afternoon. We didn't get through until 2:30 the next day in the morning. It was 9.5 hours long. I'm told it was the longest hearing in our state's history. So you did that, and then a few later on in the session, when we were working on those same bills, the Senate bills, I specifically let folks know, hey, we already had 9.5 hours of debate on this. I'm going to limit this hearing to a total of 2 hours, and we'll try and get as many people as we can, but because we've spent an immense amount of time already, we're going to move this second hearing along a little bit. So that's a fairly typical practice in the legislature, whether it's a hypersensitive bill or something that's not nearly as interesting. That's a very typical practice, is when you've already spent a lot of time on an issue once, you have a little more discretion, and it's a little more accepted to put tighter restrictions on it when you come back the second time. Because again, when we do these public hearings, it's a lot of the same folks that testify, which is great. I'm all about it. But you've already heard this testimony, you've already heard the issues. So that's what happened here. Is 2 or 3 weeks ago, this committee, well, actually it was longer ago than that at this point when the first hearing was held, but they held a very long hearing where everyone had an opportunity to testify on the first round of bills. Last week, basically the exact same topic comes up, and the committee chair decides to limit the testimony for a number of reasons, but one of them is for that. And then another thing that happened during the hearing is, again, passions run high and those types of things, and in my opinion, and I think the opinion of the security folks that were in the room, things were getting a little out of hand. There were some outbursts. It was getting to be a little bit out of hand. The House nonpartisan staff that were in the room were nervous and felt threatened about things that were going on. And in the chair's discretion, she decided to, at that point, clear the room. And I think that that's an appropriate thing to do. It's not something we like to do. We, by and large, do like hearing that testimony. But when you do have repetitive testimony on a topic you've already spent hours working on and you have a bit of a dangerous situation, or what feels to be a dangerous situation, I think it's appropriate for the chair at that point to put some parameters on things.
Yeah, and I'll just say, as a member of the minority party, I don't have any control over what we debate, how long we debate it, how many people can testify. That is solely the discretion of the majority party, and Alex is floor leader when it relates to what we do on the floor, and then committee chairmen and women when it comes to governing or overseeing a committee room. So I wouldn't pretend to know how difficult that is to try to manage an efficient schedule while also making sure voices are heard. I will say, I think for a lot of people who were there to testify against that bill that day, there was a lot of frustration that they traveled from across the state to come to the people's house, their capital, and weren't able to make their voices heard. The committee chair at the time, I think, had allowed 5 people to testify in support, 5 people to testify in opposition. There were 5 people there to testify in opposition, only 4 to testify in support, and a lot more that wanted to continue the opposing testimony and weren't given the chance. I wasn't in the room, so I can't speak to the temperament or the outbursts or some of the things that I know people had good, sincere concerns about. But I want to say finding that balance is hard because you cannot always stay in a committee room for 9 hours. And again, I said this earlier, but I want to applaud Alex for the fact that he was willing to do that as a committee chair. That speaks to his character and his commitment to constituents, even those with opposing beliefs. But I think that was a missed opportunity for people who oppose this bill to be heard. And there were people in the room who had not ever had the opportunity to testify on the bill again. And as we both said earlier, and we come at this from different perspectives, but we both recognize the weight of this conversation and the heaviness and the passion that people feel as we discuss abortion. And I think that day a lot of people felt frustrated that their government didn't want to hear what they had to say.
So recently, the sweeping education bill passed in the Senate. How do you plan to approach that as it comes to the House, and what would it mean for Missourians if it passed?
Are you talking about this session, or are you talking about in a prior session, just to clarify?
This session of the Senate. The sweeping education bill covering the allowance of a greater funding for private education and charters.
Okay, so that's actually a bill that passed last year. No worries on that. So, broadly speaking, it's a bill. It's called Senate Bill 727. It passed last year, and it does broadly a number of things. One is it has something really for everybody. It has large increases in resources to public schools.